Hi everyone, I'm Naini Thaker. Welcome to this Instagram live session that we're doing. This is the third episode of the series that we've been working on called Mind Matters for the Mental Health Awareness Week. Hope all of you are doing well and staying safe. And thank you so much for joining us this Sunday evening. So this evening we have a very special guest joining us. It is Shaheen Bhatt, and we're going to be talking about a lot. Starting with her journey of tackling depression to her talking about some tips, etc., that she'd like to give to people who are currently dealing with a lot of anxiety, given the situation that we're in right now. And a lot more coming up. So stay tuned. I am going to be joining her now. I'm going to be adding her. Give me a second. Apologies for that. Should be here in a minute. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. I mean, as good as I can be.
Yeah. How are you dealing with this entire situation that we're in?
I mean, I think same as everybody. I'm taking it one day at a time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not really pushing it. I'm not really trying to, I'm not trying to do my best. I'm not trying to win lockdown. So I'm
Yeah.
taking it like one day at a time. I'm saying I hope you're doing okay. I hope things with you are fine
Yeah,
as
I
well.
am. I am. It's quite frustrating sometimes, but doing well. Right. So, firstly, thank you for joining us and doing
Thank you for
this with
having
us.
me.
No, absolutely. So, I'm just gonna get right to it. Um, Given this situation, and we just spoke about how frustrating and how you're trying to not beat the lockdown. If you can talk about how this pandemic would really impact someone's mental health, and how one can sort of deal with such a situation.
I mean, I think it's very multi-layered, right? The ways that this is going to affect how you're feeling. I think the number one thing that we're dealing with right now is a whole bunch of uncertainty,
Yeah.
which I think is the number one thing that people are really struggling with. And I mean that again, that uncertainty goes, it's a spectrum, right? It goes from just being uncertain about what's happening and when things are going to open to having real, genuine economic struggles and not really knowing, what's going to happen from one moment to the next. So that's also on a sliding, that's a scale.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
some people are lower on the scale and some people are much higher on that scale.
Yeah.
So the number one thing that you're going to be dealing with is a whole bunch of just uncertainty, which creates, again, it's a very hard thing for the human mind to deal with, like uncertainty, right? We're pretty much the only species that actually looks to the future. We're the only species that actually thinks about what's going to happen a week from now or a month from now or 2 months from now, and we use our imagination to concoct like a whole bunch of scenarios, and there's no other species that does that except for us.
Right.
And so obviously what that means is you're creating a whole bunch of worst case scenarios, you're filling in blanks where, there's information you may not actually accurately have, you're filling in all of that. And
Right.
so it creates a situation where you're kind of expecting the worst, but you don't really know what's going to happen. So I think the uncertainty is what really affects your mental state the most. You don't know what's
Yeah.
going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
On the other hand, also your situation has changed completely. Your life, your circumstances have changed. You're suddenly confined to being at home. And again, for a lot of people, that's a sliding scale. It means different things. For some people, it means that they're now stuck by themselves, all by themselves at home and have to get by. For other people, that means they're confined with their families, which, even I'm sure even people who love their families very much, that can be quite hard, but,
Right.
because you're sort of trapped together. So that again, that means completely different things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I just think that we're just completely been thrown into a completely new situation, and that's going to take time to navigate. And that's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah, definitely. And what about people who are dealing with depression and anxiety and other mental illnesses? I mean, I'm guessing that they would be affected the most by this pandemic. So, how would you suggest that they deal with this
I mean,
situation?
Number one, so I think even people who've never dealt with depression or anxiety are suddenly finding that they're probably, experiencing it for the
Definitely.
first time. Even if you've never really had a symptom before, suddenly you're finding that you're thrown into the situation and you're experiencing like, having anxiety for the first time. So for me, what's interesting is that, one of the things that happens to me when I'm in a depressive episode is I stop leaving the house. I don't really do anything. I don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
And the situation is kind of mimicking that, but I'm not there, I'm not actually in that situation, but it's mimicking those feelings for me. So initially, for the first couple of weeks, I was in kind of a state of confusion because my brain went, okay, but this is what we kind of do when we're not feeling very good. Why are we doing this right now? Um, so obviously it's going to bring up feelings, especially if you already are dealing with a pre-existing condition. My advice is always the same when it comes to this. Making sure that I talk to my therapist. Zoom calls and technology, thankfully, that's what we have. It's all that we have.
Right.
And so I'm making sure that I check in with my therapist on a regular basis. So if you're dealing with a pre-existing condition, I'll always say make sure that you talk to a therapist. If you have one, continue to do that. If you don't have one, maybe find one. If
Right.
that's again not an option for you, there's so many helplines, there's so many different, free ways you can get online therapy, there's phone therapy, there's so many different ways that you can actually
Right.
access it.
Right.
So I'd always say definitely check in with a professional because they're going to be able to best guide you on how you can actually deal with that.
Right, right. And now coming to your journey, how has it been like? I mean, you've written a book about it, but what was it like tackling with depression for you personally?
I mean, it's been an interesting journey. I feel like I've learned a lot, but I always say the reason I've learned a lot is because I've ensured that I ensured that I demanded my lessons in the end of it. I had to make sure that I actually took something from the situation. Otherwise, I've always felt like that means it was just a bad situation that I didn't really get anything from.
Yeah.
And the book just kind of happened. I never thought that it was something I was going to write a book about. It just so happened that I, started becoming quite open about, the fact that I was dealing with depression, and the book just sort of flowered from there. It came to me. I didn't really
Right.
chase it. I never thought I'd do it, but in the end, it's actually been such a great thing for me because again, in the process of writing the book, I learned so much. Like
Wow.
it just gave me so much insight and understanding because I had to actually sit there and think about my journey. I had to think about what depression has given me rather than what depression has taken away from
Taken
me.
away from
So
you. Right. Beautiful. And I mean, it takes a lot of guts and a lot of courage to do something like this, write a book, because you're literally bearing your soul out there for the world to sort of quote unquote judge. How difficult was it? I mean, how did you come to terms with it, or what was that moment where you sort of decided that this is what I want to do?
I mean, again, like I said, I didn't really make a decision to do it, to be very honest. Like, I started talking about it. The first time I ever talked about depression was in an Instagram post, incidentally.
Okay.
And after I made that post, I think I got so many messages from so many people sort of talking to me about how they were going through similar things or have experienced similar things at some point in their life. And what it made me realize is that no matter how much you think it, you're not the only one going through anything really. There's 7 billion of us on this planet. So it's very unlikely that you're the only one ever feeling a singular thing. It's extremely unlikely. So it made me realize that I definitely wasn't alone in it. And as soon as my publishers came to me, Penguin came to me and asked me to write the book. And as soon as they came to me, I jumped at it pretty much immediately because I was like, okay, fine. If I feel like an Instagram post is making so much a difference, imagine how much of a difference actually writing a book is going to make.
Yeah.
Um, and again, I always say I don't think it's courageous. I'm not in a position where I stand to lose anything by talking about this. There are people who stand to lose things by talking about being honest about these things. Have never been in that position. I'm very privileged. I'm very, very lucky. I've never been in that
Right.
position. So it's honest, in my opinion. I don't think it's courage or brave. I think it's honest, which to me is very different. And yeah, I mean, it was hard. It was not, I mean, the process of writing the book was not easy because, again, I was going back to things that I didn't really want to necessarily, I was not dying to go back and revisit those memories, right? So that process was a little trying, but again, like I said, it eventually I think the process has given me a lot more than it's taken away.
That's brilliant. Um, and if I'm not mistaken, it took a while for you to, get yourself to go for therapy. Why was that? And how did you finally sort of come to terms with the fact that you know what you need help? How difficult was it?
Well, I think I resisted therapy, I think for the reason that most people, I think, do resist therapy, which is I think there's a belief that you tend to have that if you go to therapy, that means that there's something inherently wrong with you, or that, when I was younger, I was like, I'm not crazy, I don't need to go to therapy, I'm fine. There's also a sort of belief that you have that it makes you weak, to not be able to sort of fix your own problems,
Yeah.
which again is inherently untrue. And so I mean, I struggled with all of those ideas, and I think the reason I finally went was because I realized, the Shaheen plan was just not working.
Yeah.
What I was doing was not working. All the things that the ways I tried to fix it, all of that just didn't seem to get me anywhere. So I had no choice at the end but to actually say, okay, this is beyond my control. This is not something that I can do on my own. So I need to sort of I needed to sort of acquiesce and give up control a little bit. It's scary because when you go, again, you feel like you're giving up control, but actually in actuality, it's more that you're taking control, but you have to sort of relent
Yeah.
and just give up that
Yeah.
little bit of control to then take it back. So, yeah, I realized I just had to. I didn't have a choice.
Right. Um, and if you were to, give some tips to people who are kind of in this place, where they need help, but they don't have, they just can't, get themselves to, you know, what would you tell them? Or when is it that somebody should, sort of, how would someone know that they need to kind of reach out for some help?
I mean, that's the thing, right? That's a question that I get asked very often. When do I know I need help? I think if we just start with the assumption that we always need help, we're social creatures, number one. We don't go through life on our own. We just don't. It's not that I'm sitting in a shack in the mountains up and doing life by myself. In everything in my life, I have help. The way that I make money, the making food with my family support, all of these things, these are all things that you do with other people. So I think it's good to go with the base assumption that you always need help. And that's not a bad thing. So if you work with that assumption, then as soon as you start to feel that you're not feeling quite as good as you usually do, it's
Usually.
automatically, and again, help doesn't necessarily mean you have to go to therapy, but again, therapy doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It's a conversation I was having with a family member the other day where I was like, they said they were having a slightly hard time, and I was like, no, do you want to maybe see a therapist? And they were like, no, I don't want to see a therapist. I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm like, yeah, but you don't have to be un-okay in order to seek therapy. It doesn't mean you're falling apart in order to seek therapy. Therapy is you just talking to a third person about the things in your head and sort of helping make sense of them. That's all that it is. It's an education in who
Yeah.
you are.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
you don't have to be falling apart to do that. So I definitely say I said I recommend it wholeheartedly to anyone, whether they're dealing with anything or not.
Yeah. And I think that is still a taboo that continues to exist in our society, wherein mental illness is possibly not taken as seriously, even now after so many years.
Yeah.
So I was just coming to that. Since the time that you found out that you had depression, till now, how much do you think things have changed? Positive, negative, what has the transformation been like when about the conversation around this topic?
I mean, I think it's definitely changed quite a bit. I mean, just from when I was a teenager, I don't actually recall really talking much about mental health when I was a teenager. So I think the conversation has definitely grown. And weirdly, I actually think this strange, quite horrible situation that we're in is actually, I feel like it's taken the conversation forward a couple of years. So that's the weird, strange, nice thing that's come of it because I think people are, like I said, people who never dealt with it are suddenly dealing with it for the first time. So, there's suddenly that many more people who sort of understand and go, okay, maybe this is something we need to think about. So I think the conversation has definitely has grown. We have a long way to go, but simply that's because again, there's so many of us. There's so many of us to reach. There's so many of us to have to learn those lessons. So it'll take us some time, but I think we're definitely going in the right direction.
Right, right. So this might literally be that one little silver lining, that comes out of this.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're moving. Like, I feel like it's just moved us a little further along than we would have been at this point. I really feel like it's a nice thing that's come of it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And you've come up with a new initiative, which is Here Comes the Sun. So if you can talk a little about what you're doing, especially in this time of in this for this pandemic, and what you're doing through that initiative.
Yeah, so Here Comes the Sun is something that I started on World Mental Health Day last year.
Yeah.
So it's an Instagram page. It's Here Comes the Sun official is the Instagram page, and basically our entire purpose of it was, I realized that, like I said, when I was younger, I feel like there wasn't much of a conversation, and had I sort of had the right information, had I had the right information presented to me in the right way. I probably would have realized that there was something I needed to pay attention to a little sooner, and then I would have, I would have gotten help sooner. I would have maybe been further along in my healing by now, than I was because I would have flagged it a lot earlier. So the whole thing was that, I kind of realized that it's very important to add, as much as I can in terms of information and, handing some people, whatever I can from whatever I've learned. So the goal was to basically start the page to, build a community. And so through Here Comes the Sun, we're doing, again, whether that's providing people with helpline numbers, if you need, a list of therapists, whatever way that we can sort of bridge that information gap that there sometimes is. So that's one of the things that we're trying to do. Other than that, I've also just started a book club called the Shiny Happy Book Club, which is a collaboration between Here Comes the Sun and another very great page, literary page called Books on Toast.
Right.
And so with the Shiny Happy Book Club, what we do is we get a curator every month, and the curator recommends one nonfiction and one fiction book that is for your mental health. So it's just good for your mental health. And you don't have to do anything, you don't have to sign up, you just pick up one of the books and you start reading with us.
Wow.
So these are two of the things that we're sort of doing, and I'm slowly working on a lot more content for Here Comes the Sun. We're working on an interview series as well, so we're doing a whole bunch of stuff.
Oh wow, that's lovely. And have you had any queries like you just said? I mean, people are actually messaging you and talking about this, the issues that they're going through during the lockdown, and what would some of those issues be, and what advice do you give them?
I mean, so obviously, like I said, I feel like the issues are quite standard in that sense. I don't think any of the issues that we're having are per se new in that way. I think it's just that everybody is going through the same thing at the same time. It's a lot, and I think other than sort of being, you know, having everything happen to you at once, So what I realized personally for me, I'm again, like I said, I'm in a different position, so I don't really like to use myself as an example very often. But
Sure.
just as an example, I realized in the start of the lockdown, it wasn't that I had to stay at home or that I couldn't work or that I couldn't see my friends or that I couldn't see my family. It was not any one of those things. It was that all of those things were happening at the same time.
Yeah.
So you can deal with any one issue in isolation and sort of figure out how to deal with it. But the problem is there's five things happening at the same time. So people are dealing with isolation, they're dealing with monetary uncertainty, they're dealing with health fears and actual very real anxiety about their health, worried about people that they love. So it's just a lot of things that are happening all at the same time, which is what's hard to deal with. Um, and I think primarily what I've noticed is that's what people are really struggling with is how to fix everything at once.
At once, right, definitely. And in such a time, or even otherwise, when it comes to the caregivers of people who are dealing with mental health issues, what advice would you give them? Because I feel that a lot of times, like you said, you were very lucky to have a very supportive family, but a lot of times people don't or cannot, talk to their immediate family members about this as well. So, what advice would you give to the caregivers?
I think this applies not just to caregivers, but I think anybody who's sort of in this situation, whether you're also just sort of locked in with your family or a spouse or, whatever it is, I think it's just important to understand that this is not regular scheduled programming. Therefore, we can't really expect everybody to react like it were. So, if someone is struggling, if someone's not sort of doing things the way that you want them to do, I think it's time to have a lot more compassion and let a lot more things slide. I think it's just time to be a little kind about it and realize that we're kind of dealing with a very hard thing. Therefore, everybody, we're not functioning at our best. No one's functioning at their best. So this applies even if you're not dealing with a mental illness. But if you're dealing with a mental illness, then again, it's doubly so. So as caregivers, it's very important that, you understand that it's hard, it takes a lot of patience, but your compassion has to be quite high in a time like this. But also, what is very real for caregivers is that it also takes a toll on you as a caregiver. If you're looking after someone who's, so not really having the best time of it, it takes a toll on you. So it's very important for you as a caregiver also to prioritize your mental health. So that means you have to take time to look after yourself. Because it's very often that people who are caregivers experience depression themselves. So what I always say is, just also do as much reading as you can, arm yourself with as much knowledge as you can, because whatever little way it will help you.
Yeah, definitely. And what do you tell yourself on a bad day? I mean, how do you come out of that?
Different every day, really. I don't think I have a standard thing that I tell myself, but I think my
Maybe a couple of
main
things
thing,
that you tend to do. Yeah.
I think the main thing is what I've realized is the importance of validating a bad feeling.
Okay.
It's because what happens is, again, I think that's also very pertinent in a situation like this is, I think it's very important to say, okay, I'm feeling bad, but that's also because things are not good outside. So it's okay that I'm feeling bad and I'm not the only one. Lots of other people are feeling bad. So when you validate that feeling, automatically you don't feel quite as bad about having the feeling. Otherwise, you're dealing with not only feeling bad, but then you're like, oh God, now I'm feeling bad. What do I do? Oh my God. Then you get stressed about the fact that you're stressed, which
Yeah.
is obviously it's not a helpful position to be in. So for me, the number one thing I will always do is validate the feeling. And if I'm having a really bad day, I'm like, yeah, it's fine. If I need to stay in bed today, sure, I'll stay in bed today because, that's what I need to do. And so I give myself as much room as I can. I give myself as much compassion as I can. And I've gotten quite good at it. So where I find I can push myself, I'll push myself on a day like that. So I'll say, you know what? No, get up, go for, do a bit of yoga, go for a stroll, even if it's around the building, just go for a quick stroll because that does help me. So I've sort of learned if I'm able to push myself, I push myself as much as I can to sort of snap me out of it.
And do you think family helps in doing the same? Sort of snapping you out of it, and how does that?
Of course. Yeah, yeah. I mean, 100%. I mean, my family's been instrumental and a huge part of, how I deal with bad days. And I think it's just a matter of knowing that you're not alone, right? It's the difference between going into a war completely by yourself, or going into it with backup, going into it with somebody to sort of help you. So of course, family helps. But like you said, it's very hard to talk to family members. I still struggle with it. It's not that now I talk about these things that I immediately now, if I'm having a bad day, go, hey guys, let's sit, help me, let's talk. It's still a struggle for me. Because you do tend to go quiet when you're having a bad day. It is hard.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think it just gets a little easier with practice. The more you sort of, the more times you do it, it gets slightly easier incrementally.
So you sort of need to have the courage to take that first step,
Yeah,
then it
yeah,
becomes easier, right?
yeah.
And lastly, Shaheen, if you have some tips or any advice that you'd like to give our viewers, in terms of how one can deal with, you know, this mad situation that we're in.
I mean, like I said, validate the feelings. It's only sane. It's a sane response to feel a little insane in a world that is insane. It's not crazy. It's perfectly normal. So I think validate the fact that if you're feeling a certain way, that it's okay that you're feeling a certain way. Um, and like I said, arm yourself with as much knowledge as you can. There's a lot of we're really blessed with the age of information and technology where you everything is really at your fingertips if you just look in the right places. So definitely do that. And again, remember that nothing stays the same forever. Good situations don't last, bad situations don't last, nothing stays the same. So this will get
Yeah,
over. This will change.
yeah,
It has to. There's no other option. It will change. But
definitely.
we don't know when. So that's something that we have to deal with. It might be next month, it might be 2 years from now, we don't know when, but it will change.
Yeah,
So just always hold on to the fact that nothing is permanent.
definitely. Sorry, there's one thing that you mentioned about information and has there ever been a time, or is there ever a time where you feel that in such a situation, too much information or too much reading up can impact you a lot more and sort of
I
pull
think
you down?
it depends on what you're reading about, obviously. I think it really completely depends. Like for example, I don't read the news anymore. I've completely stopped reading the news. I know for a fact that if there's something important that I need to know, somebody's going to tell me. I'm
Okay.
going to because I mean WhatsApp forwards just come to you whether
It's
you want them or not. No matter how much you try, they somehow just come to you. So I know
yeah.
that if it's something important, I will hear about it. So what I do is I just stay away from the news because I don't find that we know the situation is bad. I don't need to remind myself on a daily basis that it is bad. And it makes me feel helpless. And so it sends me into a spiral. So I've completely stopped reading the news. What I will read about, for example, is okay, this is how I'm feeling. Are there any things that I can do to mitigate the bad feelings that I'm experiencing? Are there, I haven't so far had luck with meditation, so I find ways that are not meditation, but kind of, like how can I will just research ways to make myself basically feel better. And I think it completely depends on what you're reading about. So
Okay.
again, I'm not sitting there Googling coronavirus symptoms because that does not help me. I have health
Yeah.
anxiety, so that does not help me.
Yeah. 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 Definitely. Right. Thank you so much, Shaheen,
Thank
for
you.
joining us. It was lovely chatting with you, and I got to know a lot, and I'm sure our viewers did too. So thank you again, and thank you to all our viewers for joining me, Naini Thaker, with Shaheen Bhatt. It was great having you. Bye
Thank you
bye.
so
Take
much.
care.
Take care.
Bye.